and welcome into another episode of Popcorn for Breakfast. This is our movie review episode. With me as always, and showing off the PFB branded t-shirt there, shameless plug, your co-host, Kirk.
Hello, hello.
And I am your other co-host, Cam, and like I said right at the outset, this is our movie review episode, so we are going to be diving deep into a piece of cinema. And this week's selection was the latest film from Apple TV Plus. Well, I actually don't know that it's the latest from them. I don't pay close enough attention to what they've got coming out week over week, but it's the latest film from Joel Coen. I know that. Of the artists formerly known as the Coen brothers, this was the first film that he has directed solo without his brother Ethan, and we'll be analyzing it today. The film is called The Tragedy of Macbeth, and yes, that is the Shakespearean classic. This is a film adaptation. It's been adapted to film multiple times. But Kirk, I believe you are on Synopsis for us. So whenever you are ready to chat about the Tragedy of Macbeth,
yes,
feel free to break a leg, as they say in showbiz.
Oh, I like what you did there. And in honor of that, I think we shall only speak in heightened language for the rest of this podcast. So if you are bewildered by heightened language of the past, we encourage thou to stick with us, because we're actually not going to do that. I'm so sorry.
I stand no chance. I'm dead in the water.
I will say that I have done a couple of Shakespearean productions, one of which I was in what's called an unrehearsed Shakespeare performance that was Macbeth, and maybe I can talk about that a little bit later. The synopsis of Macbeth. Everyone knows this kind of the idea that Macbeth is this scary thing that you shouldn't say inside of a theater. Otherwise you're cursed, and otherwise you have to undo the curse. They know that it's pretty gory. They know that it's a big deal. It's one of the big ones. So what is it really? They call this the Scottish play. Macbeth is a play about a general who is given a deal, basically, through witchcraft, a prophecy vision, if you will, that he will become the king of Scotland. Through his twisted vision, he manifests it. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? And thereby destroys everyone in his path, including himself. And that, at its core, is Macbeth.
Short and sweet, Kirk. I love it. I think that's good to know, because I'll be honest with you, I am not up on my Shakespeare. I find it fascinating that in the public education system in this country, we really do not do a lot of Shakespeare. Like, I think we did Romeo and Juliet and Julius Caesar, and that was it. It's kind of surprising to me, but I knew the general story of the Tragedy of Macbeth. I knew, some names, some places, the idea of what the character is and all of those things. But this is my first hands-on experience with it. And I know it's been adapted to film a few times, once by Roman Polanski. I know there was one by Orson Welles where he starred as Macbeth. Michael Fassbender and Marion Cotillard starred in one back in 2015 that I never got a chance to see. So this was my maiden voyage with Macbeth. And an interesting one with a flair for the artistic, as the Coens, and in this case the Coen, usually do. So let's get into it, Kirk. Let's dissect the Tragedy of Macbeth. And of course, if you don't know the story, which is totally fine, don't feel guilty about that, because I didn't really know the story that well. There will be spoilers, so be prepared for that, as always. But Kirk, this movie has some storied, historic roles and some big-name actors. Kirk, I want to know who you're giving your Oscar to.
Yes, I mean, can you put both of us back up here for a second? If you're watching this video on YouTube, I just want you to see Cameron's face for this next part, because the Oscar goes to, he already knows, he's already figured it out. He wants me to say it.
Say it.
Frances McDormand.
Yes! Kirk.
I have trolled Frances McDormand so hard over the past year and a half, 2 years of this podcast.
It's true.
And this is the very first time that I could give her any accolades.
Wow. Wow, Kirk, you're growing as a person, and I love to see it. I love to see it. Next up, Timothy Chalamet on the Kirk redemption tour here. But hey, this is good. This is good. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about Francis.
Frances McDormand is single-handedly mastering the language above anyone else, because there are rules to the Shakespearean language. You can't just pick it up and read it. You have to perform it, and you can't just perform it in action with your body. You also have to connect it to your tongue and then make both of those speak, and also your mind and your heart. Shakespeare is a full body workout. If Shakespeare was an exercise, it'd be the Peloton, ladies and gentlemen. It's that simple, because it connects everything. It connects everything. What Frances McDormand knows is this language. From beat one, she is with it. She doesn't misstep at any point. I was waiting for it because I hate her, or I hate every performance of hers previous to this, I should say.
Don't pull any punches, Kirk.
I mean, not a fan at all. But this is what I want to see for her future. I want her to team up with Kenneth Branagh, and I want her and him to go just crazy and do the rest of the Shakespearean catalog, because she understands this on such a level that you can learn, but there's something about when someone just naturally, it's an X factor, and she has it. It's that simple. You can't earn it. You can get close, but she knows this language, and it made her performance stand out so much more than any other person on the screen because of that. Not a beat was missed. Not a word was fumbled. Not a single rhythm was glossed over. She nailed it. Congratulations, Frances McDormand.
I love it. And I think it's a good call out, Kirk, because I think one of the things that has been maybe a detriment to you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but she has been typecast for the better part of the last decade in most of the roles. She plays one type of role, and so you watch the performance and you go, is this any more spectacular than any of these other, Three Billboards, Nomadland, and on and on and on, all of these very similar performances. But this was the first time in a long time that we've really seen her do something out of that wheelhouse. And I think that she probably jumped at the chance to, first of all, work with Joel Coen, but also to take on this role, which she has actually played Lady Macbeth before in a stage production. So this was not her first rodeo, but I think this was a good showing for her. And I am a fan of her work, but this was different, and this was dynamic in every possible way. So good choice, Kirk. I like the pick. My pick, I'm going with Denzel. I'm going with Denzel Washington. Macbeth himself. What I love that Denzel, and this is something he's been doing for such a long time, he is so easily, he can so easily tap into that mania, that like, you can't tell if he's on the right side of his brain, or if he is, possessed by some other evil thoughts going on in his head, which made him the perfect candidate for the Tragedy of Macbeth. In fact, the first performance that comes to my mind whenever I watch this movie, hilariously for him, is Training Day. It's a similar character, a guy who is just really kind of walking the tightrope between sanity and insanity, and balancing his ambitions and glory and his moral fabric and all these very complicated things, all the things that make Macbeth such an incredible character. And I felt like in the moments where Denzel was alone with his thoughts in this movie, were when he really just, went for it. I loved those scenes where he's having, the inner dialogue, but we're hearing it. He's talking to himself and saying all the different things that are happening and kind of putting the pieces together, and he's seeing the witches, but it's actually just a crow. It's like all of these different things are going on. And Denzel was just fearless. He was in his best possible form. I just really thought he was excellent. And, for Denzel, he's never played Macbeth before. He has been in other Shakespearean performances, but this is a really tough role with a lot to manage. And I think it's even tougher in the medium of film than it is in a stage show, because there's a lot more going on that you have to focus on. On a stage show, And Kirk, I'm not an actor or or a director, but I'll defer to you if I'm just totally wrong here. But I think the two-dimensional nature of a stage show makes it, the idea that the audience is sitting out in front of you and you kind of control the way that things are played to the audience makes it different than playing to a camera and playing, in this case on a sound stage that they filmed all this performance on, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to sort of deliver lines and to block your scenes and to do all the things that you need to do to make it an effective performance. And I thought Denzel was all over it. He just seemed totally in control in his own element. You could tell that the performance was sort of flowing out of him, which is what you want it to feel like. You want to feel like the person has transcended and Denzel's a guy we know very well, right? We've seen him probably more in interviews at this point than we have in film. And so it's hard for him to separate himself from the character, but he did it so well here. It really felt like he was he was embodied by Macbeth and just really delivered. And I expect him to receive many critical accolades for this performance and potentially some award nominations and wins for him here.
I love that you called out about the performance space. Of course, this was performed way back when in the Globe Theatre over in England, where that stage is almost like a thrust stage, if you will. So everyone's mostly used to a proscenium stage where you have a big square, people perform on it, you watch from one end. A thrust stage is you can have people on three sides. So if you can get like right up in the plane of the actors, that's the thrust stage. You have theater in the round, which means the actors are in one circle and you are sitting all the way around, and then even tennis court style. And honestly, which is exactly what you think if you're looking back and forth, you'd actually be looking at the other audience and you'd be on either side. What we see in this cinematography here, I feel, is all of that. There are times when we have long hallways and we're just watching them go, and then we're watching the side of that hallway at times, and he's going back and forth, and we have where we're right there with them. We see every angle of this, and no better way to showcase the depth of Mr. Washington than that, because from any angle he's ready. So great choice.
Yeah, thank you. Really, really powerful performances from both of our leads who got recognized here. But let's talk about the supporting cast, because there are some big roles and some, to date, unsung actors, some people who really are still making their way up the ladder of fame and fortune. And let's see who we pick out of that group for our scene stealers. Kirk, you have the floor.
Thank you. This one was an easy pick for me. Actually, both of these came really easy for me. As I watched the first 10 minutes, I was like, that's one of my picks, as long as they continue to be great. And that's one of my picks. So Frances, out the gate, mesmerized by her. My scene stealer goes to the actor who played Banquo, which was an actor by the name of Bertie Carvel. I can't put it all to words, but his comfortability in not only this character, but in front of the camera, that you knew exactly who this character was, which you need that. You need that in a Shakespearean play, because it's already distant for us, because this language, we're trying to follow every word. We're trying to catch up with the rhythm. We're trying to find our way into the rhythm to go on this roller coaster of the story. Because if you can't lock in, at least be in sync with the mode of the language, then you're going to get lost. You have to be focused. You have to be watching, because every word counts. No word was dropped by Bertie as Banquo. We see his full scope of this rational right-hand man, all the way through to when he meets the demise by Macbeth's paranoia, when Macbeth orders his right-hand man to be killed. It's absolutely magnificent. I kept looking at him like I must know him from something, and I don't think I really do. There's not a lot of credits on his list here, but there's some voice acting in Star Wars a couple of times. It looks like he was actually in the 2012 Les Mis as a character, but nothing at the forefront. Doctor Who, of course, because he's British. There's all these things that I'm hoping that he gets some recognition from this film, because man, it really did. I just connected with it. I can't really go into much more detail than that. I really just connected with it. He had it down. And Bertie Carvel, can we get you some sort of award, please?
Maybe Kirk. And to your point about like, sometimes you just connect with a character. Sometimes it just be like that, Kirk. Sometimes it be like that, and that's okay too. But yeah, I thought he was great as Banquo. For my scene stealer, I'm going with a guy that I think is quickly rising up the ladder, and that's Corey Hawkins. He played Macduff. Most recently saw him in The Heights as Benny on The Dispatch. But Corey Hawkins plays Macduff, and I think Macduff is among the hardest roles in this whole show because he has to build enough conflict over very short amounts of dialogue and screen time to make the final showdown with Macbeth at Dunsinane epic. And Corey Hawkins did a great job of that. I mean, he gets introduced in a pretty funny scene where he's, they're at the castle Macbeth, when the king is there, and it's right before Macbeth does the betrayal of the king, and Macduff is just walking down the halls, and they're talking about something totally insignificant, but it sort of builds him as a character that you feel comfortable with. And Corey Hawkins that's one of his great skills as an actor, is he has this charisma, and it's not charisma in the traditional sense. It's just something that sort of is part of his essence. You immediately feel like you understand him. He has the ability to quickly get across his character's sort of modes and reasons for doing things. It's sort of an unspoken thing, but he really has a gift for it. And so that whenever you're sort of, I don't know that you're ever team Macbeth, but there's this flip that happens where it quickly becomes clear that Macbeth is sort of the antagonist of this whole thing, and Macduff then becomes the shining hero to come in and save the day. But his performance and the way that he's able to do that in such a short amount of time and dialogue just really is a testament to how he does it. Whenever he comes in at the end to fight Macbeth, you're like, Macduff, let's go, man. And that's because Corey Hawkins did a really great job performing this character. And I think Corey Hawkins has a really, really bright future ahead of him. He's been in a ton of stuff, but he hasn't really had his big, huge break yet. And I think that it's imminent. I think it's very imminent for Mr. Hawkins, because I thought this was another great feather in his cap. He is. He really does a good job. Yes. All right. Let's get into the production. Oh man, I can't wait to talk about this. This movie had a very interesting and artful creative approach that I'm sure will make an appearance in our showstoppers. But Kirk, you are up first on showstopper.
I wonder if this is cheating. But my showstopper goes to specifically the choice to make the witches combined into one character. Mm-hmm. There's supposed to be 3 witches. If you have subtitles, like you should when you watch a movie at home, you see that this says witch number 1, witch number 2, witch number 3 as Denzel is approaching, as Macbeth and Banquo are approaching, stumble upon these 3 witches who have come to prophesy over him that he will become the king one day. This eerie contortionist, the actress is played by a Catherine Hunter, who has been in the play before on stage, but this contortionist level creepiness and just ragged, just decrepit, dirty, just angly. Like there's lots of angles to her, right? Like the choice to make all those 3 witches one was brilliant. We still have 3 witches. We still see 3 witches, but we see that there is one master over these 3, and that they all bow to one, and they're all played by the same actor. So, which is Catherine Hunter again. I just can't imagine being in the production room, and maybe there was a production out there where they did this, and bravo to whoever originally thought of this, but to see this on screen creates a whole nother level of difficulty, because you could have easily, if you wanted to do that, you could have easily had, CGI'd all three in every time you saw them. But no, you saw slightly different variations of the three witches. And I'm not talking like Ed, Ed and Eddie or the hyenas, I'm talking very small changes. Like one stands a little bit taller than the other. One is the leader is the most disgusting one, but clearly has all the power. And the other one is just kind of there. The way that they shaped this to be so horrifying versus a caricature versus, the crazy white hair standing up. And then we get to that line, which some people don't know, double, double, toil and bubble, comes from Macbeth. We see it extrapolated across so many other movies. I think there's a Mary-Kate and Ashley movie that was out in the 90s called Double, Double, Toil and Bubble. I just can't get over that choice to have the witches that way. And I could watch this over and over again, just waiting for those scenes, just like drooling, almost like, oh my gosh, it was so smart. I wish I was that clever. And maybe one day I'll have a clever idea like that.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great call out. And mine is perhaps just a broader sort of version that's a testament to mine as well, which is like my showstopper really is the dreamscape-esque environment that Joel Coen and the production design team created for this film. So to go, pull back the curtain on the production, this whole movie was filmed on sound stages, which is not usually something that's done today. So everything you saw in the movie was, created by human hands. It was like a stage show. You have set design and all these different things. And the costumes were made mostly in black and white so that when the film was shot in grayscale, the costumes were vibrant, yet still in that like grayscale sepia type of tone. The production designer talked about painting shadows onto the set so that it made it look even more like you're on this different planet. They do these transitions where you have fog, and this is a really bizarre thing to have like white fog roll across the screen that's already white because it's shot on like a white soundstage in black and white. But you go to these scene transitions where there's fog that takes over the screen. All of a sudden you can't see anything, and then it clears and you're at a totally different angle in a totally different place. And it just all creates this really sort of dreamy, like incoherent, almost like ambiguous kind of craziness. And it is the perfect parallel to what's happening in the mind of Macbeth. And that's why, Kirk, the decision that you talked about with the witches is such a great choice, because it's really the first thing that we see. And she's the first person that we hear in the show. Right when the movie starts, you hear her dialogue, and then you see Macbeth and Banquo encounter the witches where they receive the prophecy. And when that happens, you have already had some transitions. You see the beautiful set. It's shot in a different aspect ratio than most films. It's shot in 137/1, which is the Academy aspect ratio. It's 35 millimeter frame or film that it's shot on. All of that, and so much more combines together to give you this really transcendent experience. You feel like you are in a different place, in a different world. You feel like you have been sucked into a Shakespearean world because they talk in a way that nobody has ever really talked. And the show is so beautiful and everything's swirling. It's dizzying almost in a way, but in a way that really helps transform you into a different place. So all of that together, that dreamscape that he creates through all of those very intricate details are what steals the show and what makes this a really very interesting adaptation, and one that, after so many film adaptations have been created, is worthwhile and worth merit on its own and warrants its creation. So that for me is my showstopper, if that makes any sense.
It was beautiful. It made perfect sense.
Thanks, Kirk. Let's talk about the other side of it and any notes we have for director Joel Coen on his first solo adventure here.
This one's hard for me. I love you, Denzel. This is not a critique to you. I guess it is. I think Denzel did a fine job. And I think to get the general public to come watch a Shakespearean film, you need a big name. I think Denzel could have benefited for more direction because we just didn't get full Denzel. We didn't get his full potential. His performance, for me, was there was more. There was more that was left on the table that we could have been given. And I think the only reason that is because Denzel is someone who likes to move. And the bigger problem with this movie is that the momentum of this movie, it never really gets there. The stakes are so high. We have the ruler of Scotland. He's got all of these different people who he oversees, and he rules, and he nominates, and he appoints. One being Mr. Macbeth, who he appoints to being a thane, a nobleman, who's above several other of the likes of an earl, I believe is what I read, which is pretty high up there in the monarchy. What we fail to ever get is the momentum of this movie, the momentum of this play. It rises and falls and rises and falls and rises and falls and rises and falls. It never climbs and soars up to the top. Because of that, it's very disruptive because you have to follow the rhythm of the language. And I felt like with some of those scene changes, they were disrupting that rhythm to set their own pace to kind of guide the audience when they should have been watching Frances McDormand and watch the language control the story and let it lead you into the next scene. While those transitions were exquisite, while they were just absolutely phenomenal to see on screen, it made the story suffer and lost the momentum. I mean, the first half of this was faster than the last, and we have just brutal murders and giant fight scenes that we should see, big war scenes that never really came about, which is a choice. And for me, the momentum just never got there, and it dragged the movie down. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there was a choice. To your point, Kirk, there was a choice made to scale this way down. You know, I think looking at like the trailer for the 2015 Macbeth with Fassbender and Cotillard, that looks like the big epic Macbeth. You know, like that looks like the big cinematic, like, war movie, effectively that you think of whenever you think of the story of Macbeth. And I think that for me is part of my reason, like my director shoes is like this. I love the way this movie looks and the way that it feels and the way, like, I thoroughly enjoyed watching it, but I'm left at the end going, this is more akin to a stage performance than it is to a cinema. And the question becomes like, even though cinematically I love a lot of the choices, artfully I think they're beautiful, but I'm like, it's not that big of an increase over the stage performance to justify those choices. It's almost like, let's make a movie that's closer to a stage show than it is to like a big cinematic production. And I struggle so hard with this because I'm like, I like the scale and the way that they did it. I mean, they made something that is very creative and very, like, I don't think many people would have come up with the way that they did this, and they created an environment that was just totally its own, and that's great. But to your point, Kirk, I think it was scaled down so much to the point where you go, cinema is about scale. You know, if you're going to adapt something from, if you're going to, in my opinion, if you're going to adapt something from a stage show or a play to film, it's got to be bigger. Like, that's the reason you do it. Otherwise, I think, you know, the stage show does its job and accomplishes that on a smaller scale. So yeah, like whenever they're storming Dunsinane, and it just doesn't feel like they're storming Dunsinane, you know, like it doesn't feel like there is a battle waging on, other than the battle that ultimately goes down between Macduff and Macbeth. But, for me, it doesn't take that much away because I can look at it and go, I see why they're doing this and the effect that they're trying to get to. And so I'm okay with the trade-off, but I get not being okay with the trade-off, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I think it does come back to that scale. The other thing that I will say is that Shakespeare is just, I don't know, and this might just be personal preference. Like, I just don't know that it works that well for film in general, because I just find it in a movie, when I watch a movie, I'm focusing on so much stuff other than the dialogue that if I have to spend all my time, like trying to understand the minutia of the dialogue, it's going to be a really not fun experience for me on the first viewing. Luckily, I had a general idea of kind of what happens in this story, but like, if this is your first time having any experience with it, I think that it's hard. I think that it works better as a play where you focus more on the dialogue than you do to what's happening on the stage, in my opinion, whenever I watch a play. Whereas a movie, I focus more on everything that's happening in the scene and all of the production and everything. So it's a tough transition, but I'll share the rest of my thoughts for final thoughts and scores. So Kirk, let's transition into that. Give final thoughts and scores on the Tragedy of Macbeth.
I like that. I also feel that it gets a disservice going straight to a streaming service because it is a big spectacle. The film itself, the entire production that Mr. Joel Coen has put on, and to see that reduced to my 55-inch television screen, it's pretty big. Instead of, I don't know, what's the standard size of a movie theater screen, 30 feet?
Big.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not 30 feet, but to not be able to see it at that scale, we don't get the full effect. We really don't. That said, you still should be able to make that transition just with the storytelling, because at its core, you must tell the story. The story comes first. I have to give this movie not a terrible score, no, but I have to give it a score that reflects that I was getting pretty tired near the biggest moments of the movie. I was dozing off like, hey Siri, rewind 35 seconds, please. My score for the Tragedy of Macbeth is 7.9 out of 10 kernels.
7.9. All right. Good score, Kirk. I've said most of what I want to say, but here's where I'll go with it, is that I feel like this is a very cohesive project. It's very clear what Joel Coen was trying to do. I think he got the desired effect, and I think it's effective. I think it's an effective effect. I think it really does its job and creates this world that he was intending to create with his team. And I think the actors all brought it and helped create this world. And I really did feel sucked into the work as I was watching it, which is where I want to go. I want to be transported into a film whenever I watch it. I think that the scale thing was a trade-off. And I think that Joel Coen knew that going into it and made that choice. And I think that, while I would love to feel more of the, thump, thump, thump of the heart as the movie scales up, I enjoyed the spectacle so much that I didn't really miss it. I knew how it was going to end, and I enjoyed the spectacle of the film and the artful approach a little bit more. So for me, I felt like this was super enjoyable, and I'm at peace with the trade-offs that were made. And I think it's one of the better films that I have seen so far this year, and I've watched a lot in 2022 so far, but my score's in the 9s. I'm giving it a 9.2 out of 10 for Joel Coen's The Tragedy of Macbeth. And we'll see what happens with the award season. But for my money, this is my kind of thing. I just really felt like if you can be super detail oriented and go out to achieve an effect and deliver it. It was kind of like my thoughts on The Power of the Dog. Like, if you just go out there and you do what you need to do. I'm almost okay with a little bit of an entertainment trade-off as long as I understand what the objective was and it's clear. But it's case by case. Like, this is not an exact science by any means, but I liked it. And it seems like you liked it, Kirk, too. Just,
I did.
Both good scores. So it's a good one. If you've seen The Tragedy of Macbeth, talk to us about it. Let us know your thoughts on this. Do you think, are you like, this artsy fartsy stuff's not for me? I can't dig it. Were you a Frances McDormand hater and now you have been changed forever like Kirk? I mean, the options
I will now
are endless.
be a Frances McDormand evangelist.
Either that or you're going to be like, this is the mulligan, like now I go back to my ways of hating Frances McDormand. But, oh man, that's hilarious. I was floored that you chose her, but I love it. I love it nonetheless. That's The Tragedy of Macbeth. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Don't forget, you can always connect with us on social media. Kirk and I are both on the social platform Letterboxd. You can see what we're watching and what we think of it on that platform in somewhat real time. I mean, I log my stuff as I watch it. I don't always review it right away because that takes some thought, but I do log it as I watch it. Kirk does the same, so feel free to follow us there. Feel free to connect with us on Discord. But until next time, we'll have a whole new batch of episodes cooked up for you next week. But for now, we'll leave you with thanking our executive producer, Ryan Spriggs, and the band Rhetoric, who creates our original music. Catch them on Spotify, Apple Music, etc. And we will see you guys next time.
See ya.